Hello. Thank you, Wendy.
Thank you. Okay, Chair, we are streaming live on YouTube. I'll hand over to you.
Thank you. Good evening and welcome to East Devon District Council virtual scrutiny meeting on the 4th of February 2021. I am your chair, Councillor Colin Brown, and I would like to welcome anyone watching the meeting via the live streaming. All participants here today are taking part remotely, and as well as being live streamed, the meeting is being recorded, so please bear this in mind throughout. And may I remind you to be careful with your language. May I also remind members that the Code of Conduct applies throughout this meeting. We also reserve the right to remove and disconnect any participant who is disrupting the meeting by whatever means. Please turn any telephone devices off or to silent. As this scrutiny meeting is dependent on internet connection and a power supply, in the event of a break in the internet connection or power cuts, please bear with us while we try to reconnect. After 15 minutes, if we are not able to reconnect, we will consider the meeting adjourned and reconvene at a later date. Please check the committee pages on our website for details. Please make sure all microphones are muted when you're not speaking to avoid any background noise levels. Keep points short and do not repeat points that have already been made, and do not interrupt. If you wish to comment, please raise your electronic hand and wait to be called. All councillors have been sent the agenda for today's meeting. Any members of the public who want to view the agenda can do so by visiting our website, www.eastdevon.gov.uk. We will now start the meeting by doing a roll call of committee members here present. Can you please now unmute your microphones, and when you hear your name, please confirm by saying present. When you have confirmed you are present, please mute your microphones again. Wendy.
Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Present.
Councillor Ranger.
Present.
Councillor Chapman.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Coleman.
Present.
Councillor Chubb.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Davey.
Present.
Councillor Hawkins.
Present.
Councillor King.
Present.
Councillor Parr.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Rylance.
Present.
Councillor Pepper. Councillor Taylor.
Present.
And Councillor Wright.
Present.
Thank you. I can confirm we're quorate. Back to you, Chair.
Agenda item 1, public speaking. I don't think there's any public speakers, is there, Wendy?
No public speakers, no.
We're going to agenda item 2, minutes of the previous meeting. If anyone has comments on the set of minutes from the 10th of December 2020, please do this by raising your blue hand. If I have no blue hands raised, I will take this as an indication that you all agree the minutes of the previous meeting. I can see no blue hands, so the minutes of the previous meeting are agreed. Agenda item 3, apologies. Wendy, are there any apologies?
We have 2 apologies, one from Councillor Vicky Johns and the other from Councillor Tony McCollum.
Thank you. Agenda item 4, declarations of interest. Over to you, Wendy.
Would you like me to do this by roll call, Chair?
Yes, I think so.
Okay, so I'll start with you, Chair.
None.
Thank you. Councillor Ranger.
None.
Thank you. Councillor Chapman.
None.
Councillor Coleman.
None.
Councillor Chubb.
County Councillor.
Thank you. Councillor Davey.
Town Councillor in Exmouth.
Thank you. Councillor Hawkins.
None, thank you.
Councillor King.
None, thank you.
Councillor Parr.
None, thank you.
Councillor Rylance.
I'm a Broadcliff Parish Councillor, so in the middle of the West End of East Devon, so to speak. So we often get to decide on Section 106 spending and SIL spending.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor.
None.
And finally, Councillor Wright.
None.
Thank you. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you. Agenda item 6, confidential exempt items. There are no confidential exempt items which officers recommend should be dealt with in this way. Agenda item 7, decisions made by Cabinet called in by members of scrutiny in accordance with the overview and scrutiny procedure rules. There are no items. Agenda item 8 is Councillor Young in his role as Coast, Countryside and Environmental Portfolio Holder. Jeff, would you like to speak now?
Yep. Can you all hear me? Right. I've had a number of questions, which hopefully I'll answer, and I've got a short introduction that I'll start with. So what do you want from me? Seeing this is a scrutiny meeting and you want to carefully and in detail examine what we as a council have done and will be doing with my portfolio. Actually, it's not my portfolio, but yours, the council's, and I'm just running it on behalf of you. So it's important I know what your views are as well. My main areas of responsibility are street scene, including beach management schemes, recycling and waste, countryside team, including nature reserves, environmental health, which includes licensing. Two areas I have been recently very concerned about is sports and leisure, which includes LED. And that's why my fellow councillor, Nick Hookway, has taken over the sport and leisure section and will also take over the important role of overseeing tourism, which is over 30% of East Devon's income and somewhat neglected in the last few years. Coming out of the pandemic, these areas will need a lot of input, with work with the funding of LED and the importance of health and leisure, plus the losses LED has experienced last year, plus the pressure of the recognised importance of our tourism industry now that most people would be more keen on staycations. The pandemic has affected every single role in our council, from organising events in our parks, cleaning our toilets, to staff cover for recycling and waste. It's been a credit to our staff, officers and subcontractors that we have kept everything going. It's been challenging, it's been stressful, but it's really demonstrated that we have a superb team of officers and staff, and I'd like to thank them all. This council is an example of good practice in many areas, with a great health and well-being offered by LED, a countryside team with the award-winning seats and wetlands, and our waste and recycling, which has one of the best recycling rates in this country, with now over 60% recycling, up from just 2% only 15 years ago. It seems that David Attenborough, the COVID emergency, now stay local and staycation, climate change and protecting the countryside have been accelerated right up the agenda. It's as if someone has just woken up to the fact that our environment is important for our health and well-being. So let's work with nature and help improve on what we have already. Once we are through this emergency of the pandemic and back to new normal, we have two major climate critical emergencies: climate change emergency and the housing emergency. Climate action portfolio holder and strategic planning portfolio holders responsibly, you may think, but and not my portfolio. I see my job as how to adapt our coast and to climate change, and how does our countryside adapt to more people wanting to live and visit it. We are very active in working to help protect our communities from flooding, and I would like to involve more communities in setting up community resilience groups to self-help in providing to prevent flooding, as well as managing through a flood event, whether it's surface water runoff, inland or coastal events. I'm keen to introduce upland catchment schemes to slow down the water runoff during a flood event. People joke about using beavers, but why not? Or at least mimic their weeping dams. We need to use nature to our advantage. It's recognised now that intensive farming and reductions of upland woodland areas have intensified flooding downstream. Now, with more intensive storms, we desperately need to reverse that trend. Through working with the EA, Rivers Trust and the ANOBs, we are trialling new concepts of land management through the ELMS trials. Environmental Land Management Scheme, that stands for, which will replace the EU agricultural policy with landowners. Just in 2 wards within the ANOB, we can expect almost 300 hectares of reduced nitrate inputs, over 100 hectares of potential new woodland, 24 hectares of beaver territory, 14 hectares of orchards, mostly historic, protection of known heritage sites, 11 hectares of bird pollinator plots, 33 kilometres of pollinator strips, 10 kilometres of buffered strips, 14 kilometres of new hedges, 24 kilometres of enhanced hedge options, 24 kilometres of new permissive footpath, and loads of natural flood management. Some of the areas that we've been working on, Clyst Valley Regional Park. We have just completed the consultation on the expansion of the Clyst Valley Regional Park to enhance and improve the habitat, biodiversity, and create a more public access to an area almost the size of Exeter, following the River Clyst and its tributaries. This will include Ashcliffe Forest, Killerton House, Poltermore House to provide habitat, highways, cycleways, and more footpaths to link residents to the outdoors. By the way, did you know that the Clyst means in Saxon, means it clean? But unfortunately, all our rivers in our district are heavily polluted, and we need to correct that urgently. Seaton Wetlands, we have created an award-winning nature reserve on the Axe Estuary that is providing a great attraction for people to visit, which we are constantly improving and expanding. The Lower Otter Restoration Project, this is an exciting project on coastal management, which Tom Bright and myself have been involved in for some years now. It's an EA Clinton Devon project, but this project alone propels us into a leader of coastal and biodiversity good practice. Estuary and Pebblebed Heaths, again, beautifully, heavily protected areas, which I will cover in one of the answers later. Coastal protection, we have the World Heritage Jurassic Coast, with coastal towns all requiring urgent attention to protect them. I can confirm we now have the plans and the finance to deliver both Sidmouth and Seaton, and the Exmouth EA plan is nearing completion. However, as we learned just last weekend, our changing climate affects us sometimes not quite as we predicted. So protecting our communities is going to be ongoing and not a quick fix, single project or two. Wild East Devon projects to bring the countryside into a more urban areas. So to sum up, it is impossible to overcome climate change and the effects of more visitors and more people living here by ourselves alone. But by working with our partners, developers, landowners, and our residents, we can. So you just need to keep draw a roadmap and work with others. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Joe. We've got some questions. The first question is from Councillor Peter Faithful. Peter, are you with us tonight?
I don't think he's in, actually, Chair.
All right. Shall I read out his question then?
That'd be good. Yeah.
My understanding of the Sidmouth East Beach is that it is part of the Crown Estates. Can you please advise me to what extent Crown Estates have been consulted on the proposal, and to what extent have they been approached for financial support for any work on their property?
Yes, Peter is correct. All the seabed up to 12 miles out belongs to the Crown from the mean low water mark, and most of the beaches in the UK between high and low water is also Crown land. The Council needs a maritime licence if we are to carry out the works if it's below the high water mark. And any leases or changes or charges that the Crown benefits go straight to the Treasury, such as leases for wind farm or marinas. But funding for any projects for coastal protection come through the Treasury via DEFRA, which we have been successful in obtaining. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is from Councillor Ben Ingham. Is he with us this evening? No?
Yes, Chair.
Oh, he is.
Yeah.
I've got a couple questions, one at a time. Yes, Chair.
Yes, please.
Yeah. Right. So when will the Sidmouth Beach Management Plan work commence?
Thank you, Councillor, for your question. I'm really pleased to say that the start date for the long-awaited Sidmouth and East Beach scheme is not far away. Details are now provided with the now agreed status of open meetings, published minutes, and whilst meetings are on Zoom, they'll be broadcast. Also, all previous documented will be available on our website. We have an outlined proposed scheme that has been approved by Council back in 2018. But at the time, we didn't have the sufficient funding to proceed. We were short by 1.5 million. Thanks to funding changes by DEFRA and other funding contributions and work by our engineer, Tom Buxton-Smith, we now are fully funded, and we are going to go to the next stage of delivering this vital sea protection for both the town and for the residents on Cliff Road. However, there are several steps that are required before we start shoveling. We are awaiting for the approval via the National Project Assurance Service, which we should receive by next week. Then we'll need to appoint an engineering construction contract project manager, hopefully by April. Tender for and appoint a consultant design build over the summer. Planning process with public participation over the summer, and the planning process next winter will, with a start date for construction in 2022. I'm pleased to report that the COVID-19 emergency have not held up the project, and we are now setting up a project board to provide extra help to our officers and to increase the number of steering group meetings to drive this project forward. As I don't want to be accused of being Sidmouth eccentric, I would also add that we have now bridged the finance gap for the Seaton Beach Management Plan, and it is looking very promising for the Fennerton, plus the Exmouth scheme is now nearing completion. But we are in the early stages reviewing beach levels at Exmouth. And the next question, please.
I've got a supplementary for that one, please, Chair. Is that okay?
Yes, the supplementary relating to that question, yes.
Yes, it is. And that's recent reports say that the erosion is escalating, it's much more rapid than previously anticipated. So what my question is, what countermeasures are we taking to address that?
What do you mean by erosion is increasing? We're all well aware that erosion is increasing because of climate change, and this scheme is there to protect the climate change and to protect sea level rises.
Okay, so it's the same plan, basically. You're saying you haven't escalated that.
No, the scheme has included the extra sea level rises that we anticipate.
Councillor Young?
Yeah.
May I elaborate on that for Councillor Ingham?
Certainly, yeah. Andrew.
I just wonder if Councillor Ingham is talking about the recent Plymouth study that was discussed at strategic planning. So the really important distinction to make there is the Plymouth study is a worst case scenario, and it's based on a much smaller data set than the data used for our study at Sidmouth Beach Management Plan. And it's a planning tool to look at the worst case of areas affected to drive future planning policy about how we help those communities adapt and where we might be able to provide alternatives. So it's not the accepted reasonable scenario that is the erosion rate that we have in the Sidmouth Beach Management Plan figures. We checked with the Environment Agency when the Plymouth study came out as to whether they would accept the rates from the Plymouth study, hoping that it might lead to greater funding for us. And they said that they wouldn't accept those rates because it is a worst case scenario and they required a more detailed data set. And that's why I think, as Jeff's outlining, we haven't fast-tracked or changed any of the plans there, because we still believe the data set that we have in the plan is the best available data. As he said, we have looked at the new climate change sea level rise figures, and some of the recent delays in getting the economics updated and the outline business case ready for NPAS has been getting those updated, but we now have that, and as Jeff outlined, we're shortly bringing that forward to the EA.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Thank you, Chair. My next question is that we know East Devon contributes a massive amount of money to the South East Devon Habitats Regulation Scheme. So what benefits have we seen in East Devon?
Thank you, Ben, for that question. Unfortunately, I've got a long answer. I feel I need to explain what the remit of the South East Devon Habitat Regulations Executive Committee is first. For the benefit of people viewing this meeting. Because the internationally important status of the Pebblebed Heaths and the ex-estuary, it is a legal obligation that we, as a competent authority, assess the potential impacts on these areas because of new development. Having completed that assessment, East Devon, along with Timbridge and Exeter councils, are also legally obliged to establish a mitigating strategy to prevent any impacts we have identified, to be able to continue to grant planning permissions. As a result, we are all collecting developer contributions for every new dwelling within 10 kilometres of these locations to help protect these areas via the mitigating strategy. More dwellings mean more people that then adversely affect this important habitat through recreational disturbance. The key benefit to us is that without mitigation, the 3 local authorities would not be able to deliver their respective local plans. So it's every new house owner that contributes with East Devon, Timbridge and Exeter and Exeter councils simply collecting the money. The Habitat Regulations Executive Committee has been tasked with ensuring the delivery of the mitigation strategy and therefore has delegated authority to achieve this. That is why there is a representative from each council on this important strategy committee. Administration is through us, East Devon, using some of our offices and employing others solely to manage the scheme. Funding goes on managing specific recreational impacts across the whole estuary, from surveys, education, signage, public engagement, foot patrols, boat patrols, and the provision of information. In partnership with Climpton Devon Estates, there is a similar scheme of mitigation projects across the East Devon Pebblebed Heaths, locally known as Woodbury Common, which, although already very popular with East Devon residents, have seen a further surge in visitors throughout the pandemic. The Heaths continue to play a huge role in providing both new and established East Devon residents with connectivity to nature and the outdoors, and this is significant health and well-being benefited associated with that. On top of that, another element of our mitigation strategy is to provide suitable alternative natural green space, generally known as SANGs for short, that provides extra additional recreational areas which draw the new residents away from the internationally important sites and to these new locations. Some people assume that the Lower Otter Restoration Project was to provide extra additional recreational space and thinking this would draw even more people there. No, it was specifically designed to provide extra tidal habitat that is being lost due to sea level rises, which is happening here at home at Estuary and across the globe. There is a SANGS area at Dawlish and the early phases of one being established between Alphington and Exminster. The Exminster one is interesting, as it is being provided in phases, with the first phases established along with other infrastructure prior to any of the 3,000 houses being built. Unfortunately, the first phases of development at Cranbrook came forward ahead of the various studies that helped us to fully understand the impact of recreational activities on the protected habitats and development and developing the mitigation strategy. As a result, while some mitigation has been provided, it did not follow this subsequently agreed mitigation strategy. However, there will be a requirement for SANGs as part of the expansion areas, and potential land for these is shown in the Cranbrook plan. Negotiations are continuing to acquire and bring forward land as a SANG. I'm hoping to have some great news in the next few weeks, but now it is subject to contract.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Can I ask a supplementary on that? That's a full answer, Chair. But that's a lot of money we've been paying in for a long time here at East Devon into a big pot, most of which seems to be spent on Dawlish Warren. So what new major project can we expect to see spent on the Pebblebed Heaths in East Devon?
Well, I think I gave you that answer, that we have spent a lot of money on the Pebblebed Heaths.
No, that's small stuff. That's small stuff. What major project are we going to have in East Devon?
Yeah, the car park strategy is going to be fulfilled in the next couple of years. That's one of the projects. We've done a lot of work on the nature reserves around the estuary that include areas off Limston. So we have done quite a lot. Yes, I agree we haven't delivered a SANGS area, but that will be coming through very, very shortly, but I can't say any more other than that it is subject to contract at the moment.
Thank you, Chair.
The next question is from Councillor Bruce DeSarum.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Chair. Good evening. I'll read out what I submitted. I said that firstly, I congratulate the portfolio holder on launching the recent Twitter campaign, help keep our outstanding countryside looking beautiful, pick it up, hashtag respect the outdoors, hashtag East Devon, hashtag litter. Secondly, I wish to know what are the specific lessons that have been learned from last year regarding litter on the beach, given the number of complaints around this topic that were received from Exmouth residents, which included, on one occasion, creating their own poster to raise this issue with the EDDC and the public. There are also resourcing issues such as the lack of sufficient bins available at Orkham Point, for example, which is very popular at that time in the summer months. Councillor Young and I had an email correspondence about this at the time, so he probably recalls it. I also refer to the service plan success comments that we all read recently, which said that following the relaxation of the COVID lockdown measures, East Devon's beaches attract a higher volume of local residents and visitors, enjoying and exercising from early morning to late evening due to the dry, hot weather throughout the summer. This put tremendous strain on cleansing and bin operations. Can the portfolio holder please confirm that this summer, following the end of this current lockdown, we will not get similar complaints, and that if we do, then next year the service plan will be adjusted to ensure that this type of demand is catered for financially in the budget, assuming we have a similar summer, particularly as you touched on this evening, we are all looking forward to staycations this particular summer. So I would be very grateful if you could, Jeff, please respond accordingly. Thank you so much.
The quick answer is yes. The longer answer is if only people picked up their litter and take it home. I've watched people leave it on the beach. Plus, I've watched people go to their parked car, emptying all the rubbish out of the car and leaving it by the full rubbish bin. I really don't understand why. The street scene team are as ready as possible for another hectic summer for our seafront cleaning. Last year, we came out of lockdown quicker than we could have anticipated, and we had not taken on our summer temporary staff. Therefore, we were playing catch up for the first couple of weeks. I believe we then managed very well, considering the increase in waste, mainly due to the pubs and cafes being closed, and takeaway food and drink was the only option. In the first few weeks, the tonnage almost doubled, comparing week on week. So we had increased waste, less staff, but after that we managed to cope very well. Just to highlight the issues with waste, the waste tonnage collected last week by street scene, district-wide that is, was 786 tonnes against the previous year of 692 tonnes. That was a 7% increase.
Thank you, Jeff. I have no supplementary, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next question is from Councillor Andrew Moulding. Andrew?
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. And thank you, Jeff. Can I first of all thank Jeff very much indeed. I know he's a very, very conscientious portfolio holder, and I thank him for what he's doing and for his introduction that he gave this evening. But for the life of me, I cannot understand why Jeff didn't send round his answers to us, written answers. He's obviously reading out his answers now. Surely it would have been more sensible to send those out to us. It would have saved so much time, which I think we're all very wary of overusing our time. So I'll go straight on with my questions. And my first one was, how many charging points, electric charging points, have been installed in East Devon and by whom?
Thank you, Andrew. The answer why I didn't supply the answers was I only finished it at 5 o'clock. So that's one. We do not have residential dwellings, but we pretty well assume that most people that have an electric car has a domestic charge facility at their house. The figures I have for commercial premises and offices in East Devon, although this is taken from the internet, is 168 units in the whole of the district. We have 16 points in our street scene depots. We've got, I've told today that we've got 4 points at Blackdown House, but actually there's only 2, because if you plug more than 2 in, it blows the fuse. So they're having to sort that out at the moment. And through a joint scheme with local councils, we are having 8 points put in our car parks very shortly. And I've been speaking to Andrew Ennis, and I don't want to spoil his thunder, which he'll be discussing the phase 2 and phase 3 exciting plans for when he presents to the car park TAF next week.
Thank you. Do you have another question?
I do have a supplement. I do have a supplementary, Chairman. It should be quite a quick one for Jeff to answer. I'm just wondering if he thinks that the charging points that we're helping to provide are going to be enough. I've tried to research the number of people who are saying that they're going to buy electric cars, and it varies from 15% to 60%. But even if it was 15%, just imagine how many people in East Devon, and particularly visitors to East Devon, will want to use charging points. I just want to know how we're going to cope with the demand.
Yeah, I can answer that, Andrew. I think we will have enough. As you know, I used to work for a fuel company. I won't mention the name, but when I asked about electric vehicles and stuff, they said, when the time is right, we will start closing our petrol stations and converting them to charging areas. A lot of petrol stations, you can't have charging units in the same place, obviously, with petrol. So once they know the market is right for them, they will start closing their petrol stations and opening up fast charge stations. And that would be a commercial decision by them. But wait for the news from Andrew next week, and I think you're all going to be so excited.
Okay, my second question then, Chair, is to ask Jeff if he feels we have a full complement of environmental health officers.
We haven't at the moment. We're 1 officer and 1 manager short. However, we are recruiting, in fact, today, 3 further staff, and this is funding provided by central government for providing businesses guidance and information on COVID-19 compliance. For the last year, a lot of the staff have been involved in making sure that premises are COVID-19 compliant. And other areas have been slightly neglected. Another issue is that environmental staff recruitment is difficult for us and other councils in the Southwest, as the nearest training is Bridgewater. Interestingly, North Devon are trialling an apprentice scheme, and this is split with work experience in North Devon and attending college, but unfortunately it's at Bridgewater. Maybe this is an opportunity for Exeter College to come in with some training for environmental officers, because they are few and far between in this part of the world.
What worries me, Chair, and this is my supplementary, is that we all know that food premises are providing takeaway food. And I just wonder if we're being able to give the same amount of environmental health advice and so on to those premises in these difficult times. And when we come to the summer, and we've talked about staycations and lots of people coming to East Devon to use our hotels and our caravan sites and our bed and breakfast facilities and so on, are we going to have enough to cope?
I think what the plan is, and the government's plan is, that we get, recruit the new staff to give guidance for COVID-19 compliance, and then our environmental officer will be able to go back to their standard work of making sure our food hygiene and other issues are covered. Because last year we didn't do the government instructed us not to go highly on food hygiene and stuff, but cover for the COVID-19.
Chair, could I give perhaps some reassurance as well? Being an environmental health officer myself, you can never have enough environmental health officers, but we do have quite a sophisticated risk assessment process that underpins a lot of the work that our environmental health officers do, and work very closely with the Food Standards Agency to ensure that we target our advice and our interventions with the higher risk food premises. And our environmental health officers are extremely busy at the moment, but they are coping and managing to advise business, new startups, and particularly how they actually operate in a COVID secure way. And I think they will be under pressure, but we are maintaining, I think, a good level of service at the moment.
Thank you, John.
Chair.
Thank you, John. The next question we have is from Councillor Phil Skinner.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Jeff. And Jeff, I think I need to apologise before I start, because it appears that I've asked two questions that are related to car parking, as I thought that was part of your portfolio, and it's not part of your portfolio, so I'll give you the opportunity not to have to answer them if you don't want to. You did respond to me and say you would answer them to the best of your ability, but I'm sure it's up to you whether you want to answer them or not, because I'm not actually now directing my questions, I don't feel, at the right portfolio. So it's up to you, Jeff. If you want me to pursue, I will. If you don't want me to pursue them, then I won't.
No, I'm quite happy for you to ask the question, and because I've got the answer.
Right. Okay. And that's where I might come with a supplementary, but it doesn't seem quite right that I'm asking almost the wrong person for the job. But I'll be as clear as I can. So my first question to you, Jeff, and through you, Chair, is could Councillor Young please elaborate on his support for turning a car park area adjacent to the new water sports centre in Exmouth into an area of open space for a perceived low rental income generation versus a much higher rental generation, on top of which an estimated cost of around £30,000 to £40,000 to grass out the already existing temporary grass car park area when his portfolio was in place. And that's where I make my mistake. I do apologise, Jeff, because it's not your portfolio. His portfolio is in place to support the council in its endeavours to create an income through car parking in what I might suggest would be constantly full. Sorry, Jeff, I'll let you answer that one. I just feel I'm talking to the wrong man, really, and I do apologise.
Yeah, we now, despite what people believe, now cabinet members do speak to each other, and we do decide collectively on a lot of things. I understand that the land designated, the land you're talking about, which is the temporary car park, was designated as amenity use, and therefore the Queen's Drive Committee concluded that the car park should not be in this location, and they've come up with a solution of, I believe, grassing it over, and that was a decision made by the Queen's Drive Committee, which I'm not on. So it wasn't part of. Now, I hadn't considered. Well, what I thought it was a good idea to keep more money coming in, but I can understand where Exmouth councillors are coming from that.
Okay, so you actually thank you, Jeff, because you actually support what I was trying to say then. So could I move on to question 2, Jeff? Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Could I ask you please to, I'd like to investigate the reason why the Mary Road car park is perceived to be empty, particularly at Easter time, when Mary Road, Mare Lane and Foxhills Hill are strewn with cars parked on the pavements on double yellow lines, as Devon County Council Highways Department allows parking until a said date. And I believe it's near the end of May, but I didn't want to say that because I'm not exactly sure, but it certainly covers the Easter period. Would it not be a good idea to have a conversation with Devon County Council to cut off this loophole, which is inhibiting East Devon District Council to earn money from the Mary Road car park? And if I may just elaborate very slightly on that, Jeff, and it's not to deviate from the original question, is that I went only last year, I went down Mare Road, and the cars, both sides of the roads, are parked all over the pavements. They're parked on the Mare. They're parked absolutely everywhere. And Mare Road car park was empty. And this was suggested at the Queen's Drive meeting that Mare Road car park, people don't use it. They do use it, actually, when they have to. But if you've got Devon County Council allowing people to park on the pavements on the double yellow lines at that particular time of year, it doesn't actually encourage people to want to go into our car park if they can park on the side of the road for nothing. So there needs that loophole to be tidied up. And that's really where I was aiming my question for you. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor. It did occur to me some years ago, as I tend to come that way from down Douglas Avenue. It makes perfect sense what you're saying, and I don't understand why it hasn't been done. And now I will be asking questions and seeing if we can get something sorted out with Devon County Council.
Thank you very much. Thank you for answering my questions. Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you. The next question was from Councillor Fred Cahill.
Thank you, Chair, and Councillor Young. I'll ask the question and I put forward. How many times has East Devon District Council prosecuted a developer for not complying with a construction environmental management plan?
Thank you, Fred, for that question. Actually, it's more planning than it is environmental, but I can explain. The control of planning conditions is through our planning department, and the enforcement is through our enforcement officers. Other than my own ward, it is not my portfolio responsibilities. But I have spoken to Chris Rose on this, and he's telling me that enforcement is not like a speeding fine, where if you record it at 45 mph, you're prosecuted. But the MPPF planning guidance and our adopted enforcement plan require us to negotiate before taking formal action. In the past, we have been successful in negotiating compliance and therefore not needed to formally prosecute. I hope that answers the question.
Well, basically, no, it doesn't. The reason why I asked it was because it's got environmental in there, and it does actually impact very heavily on the environment, because yes, I understand that it's a condition of planning permissions, but it's to do with the environment and the wider public perspective of these developments in all sorts of ways. And the public are getting fed up with Arctics parked in streets, constructors' vans blocking up pavements and so on and so forth. And this district authority does nothing about it. And you obviously aren't able to answer my question, how many times has the EDDC prosecuted a developer for not complying?
Well, the answer is zero.
Zero, right, thank you. So we've never, ever prosecuted anybody. Okay, thank you for that. I do have a subsidiary, and if you'll indulge me. Whilst serving with Her Majesty's Forces for a period of 8 years, we had a saying which was called the 6 Ps, which I have often called on in my service for 2 emergency services, which was over half of my working career. Prior planning and preparation prevents poor performance. It would appear with all these plans, whichever they are, and I'm going to allude to another 2 plans in a minute, that the previous Conservative administration has done all the prior planning and preparation, and the current one delivers the poor performance. Two examples that spring to mind are the 128-page document, Exmouth Beach Management Plan, at an approximate cost to the public of £250,000, which was delivered by a firm of consultants to the council in 2015. And if anybody wishes to correct me, I'm quite happy to be corrected, but I cannot find any evidence to confirm that any actions have been achieved in that particular plan. And to be quite honest, it's getting a dire situation, and we need to really start thinking about doing some emergency actions to try and sort out Exmouth Beach for the summer season. That said, we also have the East Devon Local Plan, which was adopted in 2016, and it was for the period 2013 to 2031. And now your administration wishes to rewrite at another considerable cost to the public. Do you accept that these plans that I referred to have been good value for money to the wider public?
I haven't seen the Exmouth Beach Management Plan that was done, as you say, previous to this administration. There is there's a flood scheme that is being developed at the moment through the Environment Agency, which is coming to completion, which I presume that that's not related. And as far as the local plan is concerned, that's you need to be asking the planning portfolio holder, strategic planning portfolio holder on that, because that was his decision to move forward with that.
Right, Councillor Young, can I just correct you? This is not about the Environment Agency flood prevention scheme, which you actually alluded was nearing completion. It's got at least 6 months work left. It's about the beach management plan, which was written and presented to the District Council in 2015 by local consultants.
Can I just interrupt there? You're talking about a plan that's now 6 years out of date.
No, it's not out of date. It runs to 2020, which is only just gone.
Yeah. Well, it's out of date then.
Well, surely the administration that have been in office for the last 2 years should be aware of all the plans that are in process. And the beach management plan at Exmouth is a very serious management plan, because Exmouth is 48,000 people population, and the seafront makes up the major part of their economy.
Can I just bring Andrew on this? I was speaking to our engineer only last week, and I know it's on his agenda to relook at that plan, but it's no, I haven't read it, and I haven't I wasn't involved in it in any way, but hopefully Andrew might be able to explain something to you
and try and answer that. Yes,
if Andrew. I may, through the chair, Councillor Cagle was quite right. There are concerns locally about the amenity beach at Exmouth, and it is quite worrying the speed at which we're seeing sand being lost at the moment. The Exmouth Beach Management Plan was completed in 2015. It's not a statutory requirement to have a beach management plan, but it's good practice. Beach managers need to do it to inform themselves as to what the issues are at the beach, what's causing erosion, and what sorts of things, steps and measures they need to put in place to protect that area. We have undertaken an awful lot of the actions in the beach management plan. I'm looking at it now, myself with our old senior engineer, Keith Steele, and subsequently to that, our engineering projects manager, Dave Turner, who was the post holder prior to Tom Buxton Smith, have worked through many of the actions, such as the trial pits on the toe of the seawall pointing, etc. One of the large actions in the plan, the largest outstanding one, which probably relates to Councillor Cagle's concern, is around the plan highlighting that it anticipated that the sediment or beach level drop on the main beach would start to cause an issue for us in the 2020s. And the plan, in terms of being a good investment, it's obvious now that that is the case, and it is starting to have an effect. The problem we have as an authority is that all the funding that's available from DEFRA is predicated around primarily protecting residential property, and there's no residential property at risk along the main amenity beach. And also the actual sea defence on the amenity beach is the seawall, of which the toe is still sound. And some of the earlier actions we took under the beach management plan were to check that the toe of the seawall was sound. What we have got in our current service plan, and we did have it in last year's service plan as well, is to undertake a scoping study to look at the options for future amenity beach replenishment and what those costs would be. And our engineering project manager, Tom Buxton-Smith, has already started scoping that study with colleagues at the Environment Agency. So we plan to carry out that study this year. That study will then inform us as to future actions and possibilities for protecting and replenishing Exmouth's beach. But that is going to come at a huge cost. It's going to be hundreds of thousands of pounds, if not millions of pounds, if you look at the works that have been undertaken at Dawlish. And as I mentioned, because DEFRA funding is primarily around protecting residential property, we will have to look to fund that ourselves as a district authority, looking to draw in other funding methods. Just related to that as a final thing, we've also got, and Jeff mentioned this earlier in his introduction, this innovation study submission for funding that we've got in currently with Devon County. And one of the innovative coastal erosion protection measures that we want to trial at Exmouth, which is in this submission, is some concrete blocks that you place on the beach that help to accrete sand so that you could put them in areas of erosion to try and hold on to that sand. And over time, the idea is that they get covered up and you have a healthier beach. So that's something we'll be looking at in time also, and can report to various committees. Thank you.
Thank you. Right. Before we go to committee on this, I see Councillor Regg got a hand up. I hope it's not a question, because all questions had to be in by 12 o'clock yesterday. Right, we'll go to committee.
No, it's not a question, it's a comment. It's to help inform Councillor Ingham that we haven't spent any money on Dawlish Warren. That was the Environment Agency. The other thing was the Mayor Road car park. That's a matter for Devon County Council, the parking along the road, and Councillor Skinner is well aware that the political party he belongs to has the divisional member there, which he consult with. And the other thing is beach management plan. We did have regional beach management plans, but they disappeared, I think, in 2009. It's something I've been very concerned about over many, many years, going back to Jim Shatler's time, who was an independent on the town council and has been dead many years. And we strongly believed, from observing the movements of sand on the beach, that wooden groins are very, very effective. And you only have to look, and I know that former district councillor Pauline Stott agrees with this, at Orcombe Point, when there was just shingle, and the sea used to come up over the wall, and they used to catch conger eels there. In fact, I've seen it happen. That they put groins in, and that built up the sand levels and held the sea back. So I'm asking whether that could be considered again, please. Just some observations and maybe a little bit of information, which I hope will help inform.
Thank you. Right, but go to committee. Councillor Maddie Chapman, you've got a question you'd like to ask.
Yes, Chairman. I did send my question in. I don't know what's happened to it. It's about trees and the countryside and the wildlife. It's no man's land. I have a problem, and I'm sure it goes right across the district. We've had 2 oak trees and 9 ashes cut down on land. Now, Andrew Hancock knows about it. I don't know if Jeff knows about it. County Council came out and had a look. East Street Scene came out. Everyone came out and had a look and said it was no man's land. And therefore, all these trees could be cut down with no comeback on residents. And the two residents involved, one didn't like the leaves dropping in her garden, and the other one said that she didn't get any sunshine. The Bats Association have gone absolutely mad because it was in the bats, which you are aware are a protected species, on their flight and feed path. And that now has been disrupted. Now, the point is, Exmouth Town Council have started up a tree TAF, and we were talking today and talking about planting trees, which we all want, across Exmouth and the district in conjunction with East Devon. But if we can't protect the trees that we have at the moment, and we can't do something about it, you know, what is the point of planting new trees? So I was going to ask Jeff, which was part of my supplementary, was that could we please, because developers, when they do a development, are asked to landscape and plant trees. The trees, I understand, are then only protected for 5 years under the management company. But talking to the tree officers, they have also said that really and truly, if a developer puts a tree into a new development, then East Devon should protect it. Okay, the management will look after it for 5 years, but East Devon needs to make sure that they can't go out with a chainsaw and cut it down willy-nilly because it's dropping leaves, or, you know, there's a bit of shade in their particular part of the garden. And so the tree surgeons think this will be a brilliant idea. And we also need traffic lighting for new tree planting, which we will discuss once we know that the trees we've got are going to be protected. So I don't know if Jeff or Andrew Hancock can help me on this, but we are losing a lot of trees around town because there's no comeback when they're chopped down. Ivydale, when it was developed, there were a number of trees put round. When I drove round to drop something off to a friend the other day, there is one tree left.
Maddie, we've got limited time, really. I think Jeff got the idea.
I did send my question in. I sent it in the week before last.
We've got the question. Jeff will answer it.
Thank you.
Jeff, can you turn your microphone on?
My mouse didn't work. Thank you, Maddie. It's true that a tree without a protection order or outside the conservation area on private land, the landowner can do what he likes with this tree. Unfortunately, by the sound of it, Maddie, these trees were on a sort of no man's land area, and now that's a big problem. If we haven't got a landowner, we haven't got any protection because there's no one to serve the notice to. It is true that following a planning approval, we generally apply a condition for the planting scheme, which generally lasts for the first 5 years. However, most trees and people coexist in perfect harmony. That's a quote from one of our tree officers. And it is a few that is causing the problem. If so minded, the local planning authority can condition the approval for the trees to be protected from the commencement with a tree protection order. And we've done that on some occasions where it is considered that that those trees will not get that protection beyond the 5 years. However, it has to have really good planning justification. But this generates further workload for officers. when these young trees require proposed works. And that all young trees need a lot of work, and if they had TPOs on all the new young trees, then all their job is going to be going around checking up on these new trees. Just an aside, we have got more protection orders on trees in East Devon than we have in the whole of Cornwall. So I think that shows how we care for our trees. We're looking at planting a lot more trees. I would like to see a one-stop shop. So when people want to know about planting trees or cutting trees down or anything like that, then they can contact someone in East Devon, and they can get all the information they need to know about the trees and what's best and what they can do. Hope that answers your question.
Yes, apart from one thing, that the trees that were cut down, the 2 oaks, they weren't saplings. They were nearly 20 years old.
Yeah, I understand that.
You know, and it was no man's land. And the no man's land, they were planted by the developer that did the development on that site, and they were on the boundary. But a new resident came in and got someone in with a chainsaw and cut them down. So I'm saying, if we can't protect the trees we've already got that are feeding the wildlife, why should we plant new ones for someone else to come and cut down if you can't protect them? You know, this is what I'm saying to the TAF and the tree officers. You know, we have to find some way to protect what we've got. What is the point of spending hundreds and hundreds of pounds putting new trees in?
But we'll have to bring that up at a later date, Maddie.
I can talk all day on trees.
Yeah, because I mean, we've been going on this subject for over an hour now, and there's still a couple of questions to be asked. So if we can get those out of the way quite quickly, I would appreciate it. Thank you. There's a question from Councillor Sam Hawkins.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Young. 2 quick questions. How is charging refuse bins collections to towns parish councils determined? Cranbrook's charged £520 per bin per year, which we're led to believe is higher than in other areas. If that is correct, why is this, please?
Thank you, Councillor. I understand that this has been explained to the Town Council, Cranbrook Town Council previously. But as you've brought it up in this meeting, I'll have to go through it again. The arrangements for bin placement and collections at Cranbrook are different to elsewhere in the district, where waste bins and street cleaning will not be enacted until the highway is adopted. Until areas are adopted, it is the consortium's or the landowner's responsibility to pay for or provide street cleaning. This is national legislation, the Environment Protection Act, and I can send you the link on that. I understand that there was an overall service charge by the consortium to each household. These and other costs were changed a few years ago, and the responsibility was taken over by the Town Council, with the charges dropped to the households, but a similar amount added to the town precept. What I would add is that the bin weights, due to the fact that bins are dual use, there is no dedicated dog bins in Cranbrook. If there were then to be the dog bins were added, then there would be an additional cost to you by Suez. I understand your concern and why Cranbrook is being treated, but it is because of the arrangement that was done originally by the consortium and then handed over to the Town Council.
Thank you.
I had a second question. How do you think SANG should be managed in the future? The town council would like to manage their own sangs, similar into the way they're managing the country park and doing a fantastic job. Would you support the town council in this ambition?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Sam, again, for a great question. I am talking with the town council on this, and I'm talking to the planners and talking to the habitat mitigation, etc., on this issue. The council policy on delivery of sangs at Cranbrook to mitigate the impacts of the proposed expansion of the town is detailed in policy CB 15 of the Cranbrook Plan. This policy clearly states that it is for the developers to accompany their applications with a management strategy to detail how the sangs is to be managed and by whom, and the financial sustainability of that in perpetuity. This policy was agreed as part of the draft Cranbrook Plan DPD by Council on the 27th of February last year, when it resolved to submit the plan for examination. The Cranbrook Plan is currently in examination. I personally, therefore, would not want to prescribe how sangs within Cranbrook is to be managed. There are several acceptable solutions which Cranbrook Town Council managing these areas could be one. However, most of the areas safeguarded for the provision of sangs in the Cranbrook Plan anticipated to be proposed for sangs by developers currently lie outside the administration boundary of Cranbrook Town Council. It would therefore seem to be premature to make any decision about the role of Cranbrook Town Council may play in the management of the sangs at this time.
Thank you. Right, we've got 3 more people who want to ask questions, and then we'll call that a day on this subject. We've got Councillor Helen Parr.
Thank you, Chairman. Hello, Jeff. Firstly, you've seen my question about fly tipping. Has it increased in the last year, and how many people have been prosecuted?
Surprisingly, it's 497 last year against 558. And I believe we have a perception that there has been more fly tipping because there's been more people walking around and enjoying the countryside, but the figures are down. And after the meeting, I can send you a Excel sheet of the last few years, and it's been pretty stable. There are, where are we? There has been 17 fly tip cases logged with environmental health, 10 fixed penalties served and all paid in full, 7 cases, no fixed penalty served due to insufficient information during investigation. Why it's only 17 is because it is so difficult to identify where the rubbish has come from. But I would love to catch more out.
Thanks very much for that. And just as a follow-up, obviously, we've got a Sutton Tip, a county council recycling centre in my ward. And because of that, if ever it's shut, people just come along. They're so cross it's shut. They just tip out stuff. And the other day, there was an incidence of 3 dumpy bags of builders material, which were dumped at the side of the road on one of the lanes leading to and from the tip. And incredibly dangerous because it was half across the highway. What can you be doing, or what are you doing? Are you working with the county council? Could there be security cameras or anything like that to help? Thank you.
Andrew, do you want to answer this one?
I can do, Jeff. So we can take that concern and talk to our colleagues at county, who we talk to all the time, Wendy Barrett, the county council waste manager, and they do investigate instances of fly tipping outside their gates. I'm not aware if they've got cameras actually, but that's something we can talk about. There's something brand new I can tell you about tonight. I haven't even had the chance to talk to Jeff about this yet, but we're investigating a possibility of using the safety cameras on our Suez fleet to catch people who litter and fly tip when they're out and about, and that would greatly increase our chances of catching some of these people. So we're just looking at the specifics of that project now, the costs, and obviously sort of data, GDPR issues and the like, and that's something we'll be talking to Jeff about in the near future.
Great, thank you very much. My other question was, what are the aims and vision for Wild East Devon?
Right. For East Devon to be a leading organisation in the delivery of species recovery, health and well-being improvements, outdoor learning and nature connectiveness across the district. This is achieved with our diverse team focused on habitat and access management, along with innovative public engagement programs. This initiative is mainly being driven by Councillor Marianne Rickson, who may be here tonight to be able to explain a little bit more. And maybe not.
Well, thank you. You've explained. And just following on from that, I looked at your service plan, and at page 3, item 8, it says you want to deliver a new visitor infrastructure to Seaton Wetlands to enhance the visitor experience and monetize the increased footfall, and creation of a cafe offer, etc. I'm very concerned. Does this fit with your vision of Wild East Devon? I am concerned. You're going to apparently resurface the car park as well and put in a machine to collect donations. This doesn't seem to me right for an experience of the wilds, the countryside. This is at Seaton Wetlands. I really am anxious. Do you think that fits in with the vision?
It depends what sort of cafe it is. Obviously not a McDonald's. I would think, I was imagining of something like a visitor centre come information centre come a little cafe, a bit like the National Trust. If the National Trust does it in their areas, why shouldn't we? But it will be low key. It won't be a no. It would be more for information purposes rather than for making money.
I'm more concerned now, Jeff, but thank you.
Thank you.
I'll be talking to you.
Right.
I've got 2 other people who want to ask questions, and that will be it on this one. Councillor Ian Chubb.
Yeah, right, just unmuted myself. Good evening, Chairman, fellow councillors. Yeah, good presentation there, Jeff. Something obviously dear to my heart is recycling, etc. I note that the recycling's really gone up well over Christmas and just after, due to the amounts being collected, etc. Something I always used to question was the double bins. I know when we first rolled out the big bins, a lot of people had a small 180 bin and they asked to get a 240. So loads of people have still got 2 bins, and I quite often see them outside houses, and sometimes 3 or 4 bins can be seen in places, or bins placed one side of the gate and another one the other side of the gate. And it's obvious because there's no recycling box, so these people are still trying to get away with excess waste. Just wondering, as technology's moved on, is there any way of catching up with this since I was doing the job years ago?
Thank you, Ian, for that question. I share your concerns on double bins. I see it in my area, and I know there's only one household in that where those two bins are. So I share that. I don't know if Andrew wants to come in on this.
If I may, through the chair, thank you, Jeff. Yeah, absolutely, Councillor Chubb. It's something we recognise, and I remember fondly our times working together. And as you'll recall, often when they are reported to us, there is a legitimate reason for there being more than one bin. That said, equally, there's often times when there's not, and we know to push our recycling rates still further, we've got these hard margins. So we've done all the big service changes, and it's now around participation, making recycling as easy as possible, leaflets and information to our residents, and engagement. And that's one of the final things we can do. We know that if we tackle unauthorised capacity to drive down and incentivise recycling, that will help us notch up our recycling rate. In this year's service plan, we talk about that, and we want to create a distinct project where we actually pull on councillors' knowledge to help us report that. But the team will also be starting to tackle that. And you might have seen through the budget process that we've asked this year for an additional staff member to keep pace with the property growth that we're dealing with now. And that extra capacity in the team will allow us to prepare for the changes for the contracts and under the resources strategy, but also make space for projects like tackling unauthorised capacity. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. Funny enough, I drove past somewhere today and they had 5 bins in one house.
What's the address?
I'll give it to you later, Jeff.
Okay.
Councillor Ellen Rylance.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say that I've just heard Councillor Young respond with incredible good grace for an hour and a half to an absolute plethora of questions. And I just wanted to give tribute and thanks really to Councillor Young and John Golding and Andrew Hancock for the grace with which they have dealt with these questions. It's a huge portfolio, an absolutely massive portfolio. And I know that Jeff has taken on a portfolio that's been traditionally, historically underfunded. And I just wanted to give thanks really to him for being able to answer all these questions. And also say how pleased I am to see the opposition benches so invested in environmental matters, that they are willing to really take an interest in it, because it makes a nice change. So thank you very much for all these questions and for showing your support to our focus on environmental matters. And I'm sure that Councillor Young appreciates the questions and the steer. Thank you.
But yeah, I think he's done extremely well this evening. They're just Peter Faithful's got, Councillor Peter Faithful's got his hand up. I mean, his question's already been asked. What is it you?
Thank you, Chairman. I actually missed the start of the meeting, so that's really half of what the question is. That's my question actually been addressed already. I can look on YouTube.
Yeah, and you will get a written reply as well, Peter.
That's fine, thanks.
Right, we'll move on. Thank you very much, Jeff, for coming down this evening.
Am I released?
Yeah, you're released now. Thank you, thank you. Right, we'll move on to agenda item 9, scoping of section 106 seal issues, which is a report from Ed Freeman. Ed?
Thank you, Chair. Excuse me. So I understand members had a scoping request at your previous meeting. So I've prepared this report, which will hopefully help you to understand the issues and scope out this matter. And I think you were aware at the previous meeting of a swap audit that was taking place looking into this area of work. So I've appended that report to the covering report that's before you. I'll just pick out the key 4 issues that highlights. So issue 1 that it highlights is a number of actions that are outstanding on our XCOM database system, over 1,200 outstanding actions that they've highlighted that need to be addressed. Obviously, we acknowledge that those need to be addressed. It's primarily a staff resourcing issue, and an action agreed through the audit is to review resources and advertise for additional resource to help to get the system up to date. We're well on the way in doing that, in that we're going out to advert for 6-month temporary full-time resource to help with that. That action is to be completed by April 2021. Hopefully we're well on the way to achieving that. In fact, we're getting applications at the moment and reviewing them. I should say though, in terms of those outstanding actions, most of those relate to various administrative tasks, and only 7% of them relate to payments needing to be invoiced or chased. And also the resource highlights that no monies have actually been lost as a result of delays in those actions. Issue 2, the audit highlight is that not all demand notices have been raised in a timely fashion, and that concerns about the recovery process. We've agreed through the audit to use the recovery process through the Excom system. Obviously, until that project is completed and that's completely up to date and all those actions completed, we haven't been able to progress that. Again, that's a resourcing issue. And so we hope once the additional resources are in place, we can prioritise that action and have that recovery process in place by June of this year. Issue 3 relates to the participatory budgeting guide, and that this is out of date and needs updating. That has now been done and is published on our website in accordance with the agreed action timescale for this to be done by the end of January. And the final issue is about town and parish councils not being advised of how much Section 106 money has been collected. Members will hopefully be aware we've been working on a public-facing module for the Excom system, which can go on our website and give people free access to that information. That has been pending the system being brought up to date so that information is reliable. So again, another issue that comes back to resourcing, but we are well on track to have that information available by the end of March as agreed as an action in the audit. So there's a number of issues highlighted there and actions agreed that I'm moving forward to make sure that we address those issues as a priority. The second part of the report that's before you just relates to the participatory spend process, which I think was highlighted in the scoping form that was submitted. So Appendix 1 of the report just documents the existing process and the guidance notes that are available to help you to understand that process. Obviously, as you can see, it uses resources from a number of teams within the council, not just mine, but also the communications team and the street scene team as well, primarily, in terms of these actions. It should be noted that a review of this process is already proposed within the organisational development service plan that went before yourselves and the overview committee a few weeks back and was agreed as part of the service plan process and is obviously moving forward through that process. So that is an action for the coming year and something that has already started with an initial scoping meeting among officers. So there is already a plan in place to address that issue and try and ensure that process is fit for purpose. Hopefully that's useful background to your discussion about scoping this issue, but happy to take any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'll first invite non-members. I've seen a member's got their hand raised, but we'll go to non-members first, and we'll go to Councillor Paul Arnott.
Oh, thank you, Chair, very much. Yes, so I know that tonight you're scoping where you're going to look for this, I'm really pleased, and I've said this before, that SWAP did this report. We brought it forward by 6 months, and it is the case, as Michael Gove says repulsively, it is the case that without us having moved this forward, we would not have known the position we are in now. Now, the question that has been a question for at least a decade, as far as I'm aware, and which I would say is a question for scrutiny, because I think all the points that Ed has made are very reassuring about moving forward. That's overview. The question for scrutiny, I think, is why was it under-resourced for so long? Why was that not identified within our management structure as a problem? It was quite common knowledge, I think. So I think that's worth looking at from my perspective. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any other non-members that would like to speak? No, then we'll go to committee. Councillor Ellen Rylance.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just a little concerned. I mean, basically, to reiterate what Councillor Arnott just said, I did actually raise concerns about the officer in question's welfare, working alone in an office for 18 months, inputting data, and probably about 2 years ago in Scrutiny. And I cannot remember what the answer was. I don't know if, Ed, you can remember what you said at the time, but I note that this is still an ongoing concern. So presumably nothing was done about it at the time. And I can't really understand that. So I think it was almost as soon as we moved to Blackdown House, that first meeting. So probably about 2 years ago now, actually. So do you remember me asking that question? And do you remember what your answer was?
So through you, Chair, at the start of this project, we did have 2 additional officers in post helping our Section 106 officer with this project. Unfortunately, they didn't see the project through to completion. And the decision was made in discussion with that officers about how we could complete the project. And I think fundamentally the problem is a level of expertise and training on the system that's needed, and it was felt that she could cope with completing this project alongside her other work. I think experience over time has demonstrated that a combination of that perhaps not being the case, and also her being pulled in other work areas, as SWAP have identified. She was pulled into the community hub to help with the response to the COVID pandemic. Shortly after, I think I attended a scrutiny committee meeting on this issue last year, and that's obviously held up our progress in terms of progressing this project. And obviously there's a need to get this project finally completed and over the line, and I welcome the additional resources to help us to do that.
Thank you. Councillor Sam Hawkins.
Thank you, Chair. One of the things I've pulled out from the SWAP report is the participatory budgeting process, which SWAP believe we are the only council that have this process. I've seen comments that it's very resource intensive, and it does make me wonder if it's actually fit for purpose. I don't know if, Ed, you've got any thoughts on that process, or whether it's something we need to have a look at going forward, and whether it is the right policy for this council to be utilising.
Ed, did you want to come back?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yes, it is resource intensive. We've been using that process for a good 10, 12 years maybe now. Yes, it is resource intensive, I think, both for us and for the town and parish councils. It does, however, have some major benefits in the sense that it obviously engages the community in terms of the design of the play areas and sports and open space that we're providing to ensure that it meets their needs and aspirations for those areas. And as a result, I think we've delivered some very successful spaces that are really valued by those communities. So it's really balancing those benefits against the resources that are needed to maintain that process. And I think that's obviously something that needs to be looked at, and whether or not we can achieve those benefits through a more streamlined process, etc., which is, I think, part of the reason it's within the Organisational Development Service plan to undertake that review. But certainly, you're right, I'm not aware of any other authorities that use that process. Most authorities collect the 106 monies towards play and open space and sport provision, and use it to help fund projects within their capital programme without going through that consultation and engagement process with communities. So obviously that is an option moving forward if members feel that the benefits of that process don't outweigh the costs and resources needed to make that happen.
Thank you, Ed. Councillor Ranger.
Yes, thank you. Some concerns that I've had about the Section 106 process historically. This officer, it always seems to be this officer that is taken off the job if something else needs doing. So we lost about a year previously, I think, when the officer was seconded, I think it was to Exeter, I can't remember now, and taken off right off the job. Then we had the 2 temporary support officers brought in, and that didn't quite help. And we were told that it was because they didn't have the expertise to do the job. So that was a problem. I think it's a concern where in an organisation you've got quite an important role like that is 100% dependent on one person. You know, if that person's off sick, or if they're on holiday, or they're seconded, or, you know, they're put onto COVID work, it just stops. And it, you know, we've been talking about this very same thing for at least 2 years. I can't remember how many times we've been told that in March, the system will be up. And then next spring, the system will be up. You'll just be able to go and look up your figures. So that's a concern. I welcomed in the report very much the much clearer process for town and parish councils to follow. Just noted that in the document, how can we access open space, sports and play money? There is in bullet point 3, there's a word, quite a critical word missing. And in bullet point 4, there's 5 words repeated. So that's just a very small point. But those documents, you know, the process before was so convoluted, did not seem to be written down anywhere. And town or parish councils, you thought you'd got the hang of what you needed to do to get your money, only to find that actually you hadn't, and there was something you'd missed out, or somebody had misunderstood something else. The other thing that I think has held matters up historically is being able to get a joint meeting with both the Section 106 officer and the community engagement officer. And I wonder, you know, perhaps we could look at going forward. I know it's a difficult thing to say, but maybe, you know, timetable in certain slots where town and parish councils know that they can, those are the slots they can go to, those are the community slots where they can meet with both of those officers. I know we've tried to historically get meetings together, and it was sort of 3 months before we could get the 2 officers together, which definitely slowed things down. I'm just checking my notes if there's anything else. No, I think those were my points. I actually did very much welcome the swap process. Very often you read audits and they're all a bit airy-fairy. I thought this one was very specific and very helpful, and actually kind of gave quite sort of measurable outcomes. This is what we need to do, and this is how it needs to be done. So I very much welcome that. Thank you.
Thank you. I can see no other hands raised by the committee. Is there any recommendations to come forward? Councillor Parr.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, well, I can see the recommendations on Ed's report, and it seems to me very sensible. There's already going to be a review of this as part of the draft service plan for organisation development. I don't want us to be reinventing the wheel, and I certainly want to propose those 2 recommendations, the one acknowledging the findings of the very useful swap audit, and 2, this review that is already planned. So I want to propose those, please.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder for that?
Looks like Councillor Ranger's got a hand up.
Yeah.
Sorry, I wasn't seconding that. So I don't know if you want to wait for a seconder before. I had just raised my hand to make another point.
No, we haven't got a seconder at the moment. No, but Councillor Ranger.
Sorry, I think my point is the reason that I haven't seconded that recommendation is because I don't really understand. Well, recommendation 1 is one of those la ones, isn't it? Note it. Yeah. Okay. recommendation 2, note a review. So where is that review? Who, what committee is that sitting under? What portfolio holder is that sitting under? When will that be? How would I know to attend that? So I would support a review, but I want to know who's doing it and when it is.
Ed, do you want to come back on that?
Well, as I said, it sits in the organisational development draft service plan, and obviously Mark is currently acting as strategic lead for that area of work. So my understanding is he would be leading on that work. I'm not sure in terms of what the expectations are in terms of reporting that to committee, but presumably, logically, that would be overview, as it's a forward-looking change rather than a scrutiny of past issues. So I didn't see that as for this committee necessarily, but I stand to be corrected if I'm wrong.
Councillor Rylance, did you?
No, Chair. Do I have my hand up still? No.
I've got my names wrong. Sorry, I'm at Councillor Ranger. I'm looking at one picture and saying something else. Sorry.
So sorry. So I would support Councillor Parr's recommendation if it were worded such that that recommendation that the matter goes to overview for for review for
further consideration.
Chair, would it help if I just commented?
Councillor Parr, is that yes? Right, we have a recommendation.
Yeah,
Chairman. I think the Chief Exec was trying to speak.
Yes, that would help. Thank you.
Yeah. So obviously the service plans run from April, so it's a piece of work that we've scheduled to commence in April, albeit Jamie, I know, has sort of started looking at a potential revised draft, but more than happy that it goes to overview for their consideration, but also we'd be planning to bring it through Cabinet as well.
Thank you. Right, we have a proposal and a recommendation. Would you like to read the proposal out, Wendy?
Wendy, shall I do that?
Yes, please.
Yeah, so you've got recommendation 1 that members acknowledge the findings of the swap audit into section 106/SIL and the recommendations made in that audit. Then the original recommendation 2 that members note that a review of the section 106 spend and participatory spend process forms part of the draft service plan for organisational development. Then with the add-on that I guess within that recommendation, it is requested that that review then go to overview for their consideration.
Yeah.
Does that work for the proposer and seconder?
Yep. Agree.
Yes, well, I can see 2 nods there. Yes.
We're there. I think Wendy's going to take the vote then.
Right. All those people.
Or Sarah.
All those people in favour, can you raise your hands accordingly? I can't find my hand.
Wendy, Sarah, is one of you?
Yeah, Chair, we have 10 hands in favour.
I can't find my hand, so it's...
That's 11 then.
11 hands in favour.
Okay.
Right.
That's
okay.
And against? I don't think there's anyone against, is there? And no abstentions.
We had
so
two against.
Against 2?
Sorry, Chair, I wish to abstain.
I'll abstain.
Okay. Can we just do the against? With this new system, they move really quickly. Against, I think that was 2.
Yeah.
Just one more item to go. I think it's been done 20 minutes or so.
Okay. All right. Yeah,
somebody's left.
That motion is carried. The next item is agenda item 10, the forward plan. There's a proposal form from Councillor Ellen Part on staff morale, wellbeing, and I invite Councillor Parr to speak before inviting other members. Councillor Parr.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, it's all on my form there. I suggest that we could, the matter has been raised before, and obviously most recently at Cabinet, it was agreed to appoint a new officer for that area. And I think as caring councillors, in view of the tremendous pressures that the pandemic have put on officers and changes that they've been dealing with, I think we ought to be kept informed of the welfare of the staff, who are our primary concern, and the Chief Executive has actually offered to come and talk to the Scrutiny about this matter. I don't think it needs scoping. I would really like to simply ask that the Chief Executive be invited to come to a meeting as soon as possible. This matter is urgent, and give us his views on the situation, what actions he's taken, any actions he thinks might help. I looked up our last meeting at the 10th of December, where we had our performance indicators, and of course the latest one there was green, but I think we know that since then that position has changed. We didn't actually have any kind of report on the absence figures at all, just this green indicator. The full report was silent. I know we can look up the Happy Healthy Here survey, and I understand there's another one about to finish, and I am sure that the results of that will be published soon. But I would just like us to invite the Chief Executive to come and talk to the meeting. We must, as caring councillors, I think, just find out what the position is with regarding staff welfare and morale at this time.
Thank you. I'll go to non-members first. Councillor Eileen Wragg.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to congratulate you on the way that you've chaired this meeting tonight. It's been a difficult meeting, I think, particularly at the start. I'd like to say that as the Chief Executive is present and he's been asked for his views, perhaps he'd like to respond. But also I'd like to say that there appears to be a concerted effort in an attempt to discredit this administration by implying or inferring that we are bullying councillors. And I think that is totally, totally inappropriate and wrong. If I were anything to do with an organisation that had any bullying implications, I would leave it. And I'll leave it there, Chairman, but I think as the Chief Executive is here, perhaps he'd like to answer.
Thank you. I'll go to Councillor Paul Arnott first, who's got his hand raised.
Oh, it's just a bit of information, really, Chair, but actually the Chief Executive could give it as well. But he advised me yesterday, I don't think it's not a secret, that at the moment, there's a standard HSE staff survey is with the staff. So the staff are being surveyed, I understand, at the moment, and I'm very much reassured by that. I think that's exactly the right thing to do. I'm not quite sure when the survey ends. I think Mark might be able to confirm. I think it's probably tomorrow. And so naturally then, because this is a live issue, this is something I'd have thought's a matter for overview rather than scrutiny, but that's a matter for scrutiny. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. At a previous meeting, Mark did say he would come along and give a report on the staff, their well-being, etc. And it would be nice for that to come forward, especially as there's one going around at the moment with the staff. Right, there's no other non-members' hands raised, so we'll go to. Oh, we've got Councillor Phil Skinner. Sorry, Councillor Skinner.
Thank you, thank you, Chair. And from what Councillor Arnott has just suggested about whether it goes to overview rather than a scrutiny, I think actually what it needs to probably do is it probably needs to. I absolutely agree with Councillor Parr's views that the Chief Executive address the scrutiny committee, but I also feel that probably it would go to overview, and then of course from overview it would then be able to scrutiny could look at it from overview, because you've then got something to scrutinise, and whatever is put forward or comes forward or what comes out of that particular debate at overview, that's exactly what the purpose of a scrutiny committee is to scrutinise some of the decision making or some of the decisions that are being placed or put forward, particularly in this particular issue, to see if there's anything that needs scrutinising from the overview committee. So I think there's a path of travel here, Chair, through you, if you don't mind, in what absolutely agreeing with what Councillor Parr has suggested in the Chief Executive attending a meeting of the scrutiny just on an information basis to say where the views are. And then, of course, as Councillor Arnott suggested, in going forward to overview, I think that's the proper and correct. And then, of course, then I would have thought it then follows in that from overview that if you as scrutiny chair wanted to bring that into scrutiny and members felt that was the right thing to do, that's obviously the right course of action to take. And I'll leave it there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Right, we go to committee. Councillor Ellen Rylance, you've got your hand raised.
Thank you, Chair. So I just find myself in the unlikely position of agreeing with both Councillor Arnott and Councillor Skinner that I mean, I thought that the purpose of scrutiny was to scrutinise things that had already happened, not things that were underway at the moment. And as I understand, the staff are quite rightly being consulted about welfare right now after the most difficult year probably they've ever had. And I think that it's right and proper that they should be consulted, but it's also not, to my mind, the right forum for something that's underway at the moment. And yes, okay, after we've collated all the information, after we've got to the end of the process, maybe we can extract some learning from it. But I'm not convinced it's not a job for overview rather than scrutiny. So, you know, I'm just a bit confused about why it's been brought to scrutiny, really. It just doesn't seem like the appropriate forum for something that's live, so to speak. I mean, and I'm really looking, I welcome the staff being consulted about their welfare and how they're feeling, and all the other actions that are going into, you know, ensuring the welfare of our officers. But I think we maybe need some evidence before we talk about it at all. So we should probably collate all the information from the staff welfare surveys and turn it into some kind of presentable data, and obviously anonymized, so that we can actually have an idea of what's going on. So it just doesn't seem that scrutiny is the right forum for it. And I just wouldn't support it going to scrutiny at the moment, I'm afraid.
Councillor Velranger.
Thank you. Yes, and you know, I think I too have considered, you know, is it overview, is it scrutiny? I think the other thing that we need to think about is in terms of duplication of, you know, officer time. And I think Councillor Skinner made a good point that, you know, you can put it into place at overview and then review it at scrutiny. I think, especially in these days of the Zoom meeting, actually, it could probably go to one or the other meeting. And then in that case, I would argue more for overview to start with, given that we can all attend all of the meetings much more easily now than we could when we were attending in person. So, you know, I've been a bit torn, but perhaps on balance, it is a piece of work that could go, the results of the staff survey that's being done now could go to overview, with the point being to more quickly act on it and make recommendations that can be put into place. And just the other point I'd like to make, because I know we're all very concerned about staff mental health and welfare, but I think we should never forget that for everybody that is finding this a very difficult time, for some people the working from home is a joy, and you know, going forward, I don't want to preempt any recommendations, but you know, going forward, you know, flexibility. I think people work best where they're happiest, and so I know we're focusing on how distressed everybody is, but let's not forget that for some people, you know, it's not all bad working from home, and works integrates into their lives very nicely, saves the environment, saves the traveling, saves the hassle. But I know equally for some people who absolutely hate not having that demarcation between work and home, you know, that is, I fully appreciate that's very stressful. But yeah, so I'm thinking overview, although I appreciate the balance. But in terms of one officer taking one report, we can all attend because we all can on Zoom now, and then more quickly get those policies into place going forward.
So, Chair, could I just come in just to help out, ideally?
Yes.
I mean, it really doesn't matter to me, you know, whether Scrutiny want to look at it or Overview want to look at it. I will be bringing a report to Cabinet in due course. I'll be discussing the matter with the relevant portfolio holder. It really is just then an issue for Scrutiny in terms of this committee tonight or Overview, maybe a future conversation or future debate to decide whether they also want to be involved in the conversation. So it literally was, you know, Scrutiny looks at things like performance insofar as, you know, morale and other issues might impact on performance. That would be the reason it would be appropriate for Scrutiny. Overview would normally be with regards to policy development. I don't actually think this is an issue necessarily of policy development. It may be, but we'll have to wait and see. So primarily it will be coming, if Scrutiny don't want it, it will be, I'll take it to Cabinet and we'll see how we get on from there, basically.
Yeah, but going by what you said at a recent meeting, Mark, you said you were prepared to bring this to Scrutiny as a verbal report. Are you still of the same opinion?
I'm more than happy to bring it to Scrutiny. I don't feel that it's something that's necessarily possessive for any, you know, individual committee. It won't be a verbal report. It will be a report that's sort of backed up with evidence, and that's why I've undertaken the survey fundamentally.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Phil Skinner.
Thank you, Chair, and giving me the opportunity just to come back, and I'll try and be as brief as I can. It's clear to me now that actually I thought this was a really, really important issue, and one whereby nobody would actually absolutely fear which committee it goes to on the basis of us getting to drilling down to what any issues, if there are any issues indeed, we can set about. For my mind, what the Chief Executive has said now, I absolutely support in what he's saying, and in actual fact, to me now, that it was more of an importance of it going to Scrutiny, and no doubt perhaps it's your call, and I'd like to know who makes the call of it going to Scrutiny. Is it you as chairman, or is it, sorry, as chair? We get that right. Is it you as chair, or is it you as chair in conjunction with your committee, or you as chair in conjunction with your vice chair? Or how does it work that if Scrutiny wants to take it, that it's not overrun by anybody else within the council, that it can overrun what you want to do as far as the Scrutiny committee is concerned? And I'm really concerned about this now, because there seems to be a bit of a dilemma of not letting it come to Scrutiny from some members for whatever reason that might be. And I just want to get to the bottom of that. It appears to me Scrutiny is the place for this to go, and I feel stronger about that now than I did when I actually started my position. Thank you.
Thank you. I personally would like it to come to scrutiny, but we'll see what other people have got to say. Councillor Rylance.
Thank you, Chair. I just wonder whether Anita had any opinion on whether it should go to scrutiny or to overview, what the most appropriate forum would be for it.
Sorry, I missed the first bit.
I just wonder whether whether legal had any view on it.
Anita?
Oh, you'll like my view. I think it is entirely capable of scrutiny by or consideration by either committee. Potentially scrutiny in the what have we done so far and how have we gone about it, that rearward facing camera, and potentially overview to look, as the Chief Exec said, about how we think things need to be going forward, picking up Councillor Ranger's point about the fact that the world is a different place and we don't have to go back to how it was, and looking at those forward facing things. So unhelpfully, I think it is for either committee. I think in an ideal world, it might be something for scrutiny to consider first and then to go to overview. But of course, time isn't necessarily in our favour, and there would be a duplication of resource. Is it worth considering a joint committee or scrutiny to look to start with once the Chief Exec has a report, and consider whether you do want to then take the Chief Exec's report at that stage, or whether you think it would be better at that point going forward to overview because of the time considerations. It's not terribly helpful. It's a bit on the fence.
I think it might be better coming to scrutiny, and then we can make recommendations for overview to look at it.
Certainly possible.
And then that's covered both aspects of it. So if you come to scrutiny first and then go with recommendations to overview.
You can't, I might have to check my constitution. I don't think you can recommend to overview. You can recommend to cabinet or council.
Right.
You could, of course, talk to the chair of overview and ask the chair of overview to take them out. But I don't think you can as a committee recommend to them.
Right. Well, if you can come to scrutiny first, and then we can take it to cabinet or full council.
May I come back, Chair?
Yeah.
Is it? I mean, is there any mileage in calling a joint scrutiny overview meeting? Because this is actually a very serious matter that we should actually be examining under many angles. And I just wonder whether we could, I mean, given that we're in the age of Zoom now, whether we could call a joint, unusually mid-year, call a joint scrutiny overview meeting, so we can look forward and backwards at the same time. Just putting it out there.
Yeah.
It's certainly achievable for you, Chair, and that might solve some of the issues.
Yeah.
Like a single issue meeting just to look at this with nothing else interfering.
It's possibly a way forward.
Can I come in, Chair?
Sorry, who's that?
Maddie.
Yeah, you're next one on the speaker list, Maddie.
Yeah. Exmouth Town Council, we've had a couple of meetings of HR group, checking on our staff, and any problems we've managed to air out. Now, we don't know how long this lockdown is going to go on for. We don't know what's happening. So it therefore is very important that we know how the staff are coping. If any are having problems, if there's anything we can do, I have no objection to a joint scrutiny and overview. But I think we need to know how the staff are coping. Some members of staff I know probably aren't, because I'm going by town council, and also from councillors. You know, we have good days and we have bad days. If there's anything we can do to help, then I think we should be mindful of that and be supportive. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Ranger.
Yeah, I just want to clarify my position because I think probably this time last week I was thinking perhaps scrutiny first, then overview. Actually, it was what the Chief Executive said. He said, it's not about policy development. I totally disagree. I would have thought that it is about policy development in how staff work going forward, and how staff, how it suits them to work, and if they prefer to work from home, that, you know, that can be built into our staff policy. And if they prefer to be in, and obviously there are times when they have to be in, and, you know, times when they have to be out, but I thought that's the whole point of doing this, that it is about, it's a new way of working. We might want to recruit people, top officers that live in Northumberland, but they're top category staff, and our new policy going forward means that they don't have to live round the corner. So that is why I changed my position. I would happily support a joint overview and scrutiny, but last week I was very much, well, I think it's about scrutiny first, then overview, but I very much changed earlier in this meeting to saying no overview, because I think it's 100% about writing policy going forward in how staff work for East Devon District Council to ensure that they are happy in their work, and it works, and that productivity doesn't go down.
So, Chair, can I just come back and try and help? You know, it really doesn't matter to me where or who I report to, but also it is important that, you know, you make a decision based on accurate information. And so, for example, you know, just to sort of help committee, we've had a working from home policy in place for several years now. What's different is the way that COVID has accelerated that policy. So the decision that will come maybe June time, maybe July time, maybe August time, is arguably the extent to which it's safe to go back in the office. But we don't need actually any new policy development with regard to how or where we work. We've had that policy for a number of years, and as many organisations have found, COVID has accelerated that. So that's what I don't see in terms of what's likely to come out of the survey. It's going to be new policy development, is going to be how we react to what the staff are telling us. And some of that will be outside of our control, because some of that will be to do with the pandemic, the impact the pandemic's having on everybody, and the way that individuals are responding to that pandemic. Some of it, more than likely, I guess, will be to do with things that we can look at about, well, how do we change? How do we alter? Do we need more resource? Do we need to redirect a resource? What is the appropriate response? So, you know, fundamentally, it will be a piece of work that I'll work on with the portfolio holder to try and get sure that, you know, there is an understanding at that level, at cabinet level, to the issue, to the appropriate response. And I almost thought I offered it now. I just offered to go to scrutiny on the basis that I thought you'd be interested. But whether you want it to be joint, singular, successive, as I say, I really don't mind. It's a piece of work that's going to happen anyway, and you can pick it up in due course after Cabinet have considered it, or you can have a look at it at the same time or in advance, however, whatever takes your fancy fundamentally. But I just want to reassure this committee that we have a lot of very progressive policies in place already, which have allowed us to cope and adapt successfully to the challenge that COVID has thrown at us. What the issue is, you know, what's coming out of this new way of working, for example, and things like that.
Thank you. Right, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 speakers, and then we can go to a recommendation for this. Councillor Ollie Davey.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to be very brief. I'm certainly not going to enter into the overview versus scrutiny, but I just would like to suggest that whatever we look at, we do look at what the current provision is for the support for staff who might be experiencing stress or other mental health issues. I think that should be part of any review. It's fine having policies in place, but I think, and a survey of staff, but they don't always, you know, people don't always feel able to do that. But I would like to look at what provision we have currently for staff to be able to go to somebody and say, look, I'm finding this a bit too much for me, or whatever they need help with.
Thank you. Councillor Fabian King.
Thank you, Chair. Could I ask that in whichever forum the matter is discussed, could we be equipped beforehand, not just with the survey, but I think it's important that we have background, and I think a lot of us in this Zoom meeting know about questionnaires and surveys and how actually they are, if they're to be useful, they've got to be quite ingenious. We need to know who is issuing them because the authority overshadows those who are answering it. They need to be brief but comprehensive, simple, but to be useful, they've got to be quite complex actually. So is that hidden? Is it ominous? Is it straightforward? The bias, the scope, the framing for the responses, what is the format of responding, and the sequencing of the question, the path of question to question to question. We don't have to have a big debate. We don't have to have a big thesis about it. But I do ask that we have enough given to us before it is discussed in whatever forum, so that we can have eyes open about the importance of the data coming out, and so on and so forth. I think you quite understand what I'm saying. So that's just a request for the meeting, in hand for the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Eileen Wregg.
Thank you, Chair. Well, we used to have a joint, an overview and scrutiny committee, and then they were separated out. And I never really saw the point of overview, because I always thought that if there were decisions made, that they would go to scrutiny anyway, and they could be called into scrutiny. It was a filter, really. So really, I don't know who agreed the staff review. Was it a council decision? Was it an officer decision? I don't recall it. I think it's a good thing. I do think it's a good thing. But I do think that as that, has been, accepted, that then it should go to scrutiny, because that's what scrutiny is for, to scrutinise findings.
Thank you. We're finished with Councillor Phil Skinner.
That's all been said. I support you. All know what I just want you to have the ability, Chair, to be able to call this in, and I think there are many members now who are suggesting perhaps scrutiny is the place to call it. If you've got that ability, that's fine by me. Thank you.
Thank you. Right. Any members want to say a last word, or can I say that I would like this, as Mark Williams has said he'd like it to go to scrutiny. Eileen Wregg has said he'd like it to go to scrutiny, and I would like it to come to scrutiny. So can we have a vote on that, please? Those people in favour.
Is this just a vote on it coming to scrutiny, or do you want to look at some of the initially and then we'll look at some detail?
No, just a vote and it coming to scrutiny.
Just a vote. Okay, thank you.
And I can't raise my hand again.
Okay.
But my hand is raised.
It's 9 hands plus yours, which makes 10, Chair.
Yeah. And anybody against it coming to scrutiny? 1 that I can see. And abstentions?
Also
1.
Yeah. Chair, I think you had a recommendation at the beginning from Councillor Parr, which I think was a recommendation. Would you like me to read that?
Yes.
Which was that the Chief Exec be invited to come to a meeting as soon as possible to give his views on the situation, to explain what he thinks needs doing and what he thinks could be done to help, and to invite the Chief Exec to speak at the next meeting. I think that was the gist of Councillor Parr's recommendation.
Yeah. All right, all those, oh, well, we've got a seconder for that.
Do it yourself, Chairman.
Yeah. Well, I'll propose that then. So I don't need a seconder. Right, all those in favour? Oh, my hand's not working, unfortunately. We've got 1, 2, 3.
Going up slowly.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 2, 3,
Chair,
4.
we have 8 plus your
8.
hand, 9
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
favour.
Yeah. And those against? Two. And those who are abstaining?
1.
1. All right, so that motion is carried. We move on to the item number, the next forward plan. I've lost my paperwork here.
It's Councillor Rangers, page 34.
Yeah.
Yeah, Councillor Range, your recommendation?
Yeah, so I've just you've seen what I've suggested, that we have a look at planning enforcement in scrutiny. It was touched on in the overview and scrutiny meeting earlier this year about stats in planning enforcement, but we didn't really have time in that meeting to go into detail. So you know, we're all very well aware, nobody needs to tell us that we can't look at planning decisions, we know that, but this is about the process of planning enforcement, so that a better understanding of the workload of officers, a better understanding for members of how typically their work pans out, parity across the district of decision making, you know, are some areas more under pressure than others? I mean, it sometimes seems to me I could keep one enforcement officer busy just in the very local area. I think it would be useful to know how they prioritize workloads in planning enforcement, what officers would like to see in place to make their job more manageable, how councillors can work best to support the enforcement officers, what officers would like from councillors and members of the public to ease their workload. I'd like I think we could have a better understanding of what checks and balances have to be put into place when officers are looking at planning enforcement. I think it would be useful for members to understand how they can be kept fully informed of the process as it goes along. Just this evening, for example, Councillor Cahill mentioned, how is Kemp managed? How is it ever enforced? That's, you know, that's a perfect example of questions that could come up in this meeting. Councillor Chapman was talking about tree management on sites, and, you know, how can that properly be managed and enforced? I know we had an answer earlier, but I think it would be a very good opportunity for us to come together and ask all those questions that you've always wanted to ask about enforcement. And slightly off topic, but just while we're talking about it, also Councillor Cahill mentioned that this administration had been in place for 2 years. So just putting it straight on the record that this administration has been in place since May, I think 8 months. So just to clarify that. But anyway, so I digress. So yeah, I wondered if other members would like to have a look at planning, and I outlined in my scoping paper many of the sort of different questions that I think we've all had over the years. And I don't remember this coming to scrutiny before. since I've been on the council. And maybe it's time we had just an open discussion where people could ask all their questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I second that, Chairman?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, in my area, I could keep an enforcement officer going full time, 7 days
Couldn't
a week.
we all?
Yeah.
Couldn't we all?
Councillor Rylance.
Well, I live in the West End of East Devon, so I could probably keep a team of them busy round the clock. So I fully support an investigation into it could yield some very interesting results. Let's put it that way, and we'll certainly get some very interesting questions about planning because it's something that exercises a lot of people. So I fully support Councillor Ranger's proposal. I think we should definitely look at it and try and get as many different people to ask questions and as many different people as we can to answer the questions, particularly those involved in enforcement at present, to see if there are any things that need better resourcing.
Thank you. Councillor Ragg.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I had an interesting planning application which came before us at delegations yesterday. And it involved planning enforcement, and the enforcement officer had been to the site 4 times where no application had been made, none. And the officer's recommendation was to let it go through, let it go by. Now, I wasn't happy with that, and I've referred that to the planning committee. So yes, we are very aware that there are issues with planning enforcement, and maybe we need to resource that area a little more than we have done. But the thing is, the process has been carried out. The non-applicant hasn't responded, the owner of the site, and so what do you do there? It's a bit of a conundrum, but the issue is being addressed.
Right, we seem to have no more speakers. We have, sorry, Councillor Fabian King.
Thank you, Chair. Yep, just a quick one. I think whilst we can look at our own situation and our needs, and we are sensitive to the enforcement officers and their predicaments, I think it would be really useful also for us to have a better understanding of the forces at play, because the enforcement officers and the policy that is managed by the planning team is, to a large degree, it is also influenced by what's going on in the outside world, such as the way central government manages and inhibits the district councils perhaps for reasons for heading for unitaries or whatever. But we have had a lot of our teeth drawn, and also in their very good operational management, they have to make the management teams have to make decisions about effectiveness. Where can they be most effectiveness under these regimes? And I think it'd be really useful for us to have a better appreciation of that as we consider what's already been said. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, we have a recommendation and a seconder. Would you like to read out the recommendation?
Councillor Ranger, could you just confirm the detail for me, please? I didn't catch all of it.
Yes, sorry, I was just writing it down.
Yeah, sorry.
You might need to help me, you know what I'm like with my recommendations. So that a report on the planning enforcement process should come to scrutiny so that members can ask questions and fully understand the forces at play. And then my second recommendation, or perhaps I shouldn't preempt this, is that scrutiny can consider if the planning enforcement team are fully resourced, suitably resourced.
Very sprawling.
Yeah. And the seconder, do you agree with that?
Yes.
Happy with that?
Yeah.
I think that's right. So if I just read that for you, members. So recommendation 1, that a report on the planning enforcement process should come to scrutiny to enable members to fully understand the forces at play. And so do you want to do that one first? Take them separately or together, Chair?
You can take them both together, I would
Okay,
imagine.
so the second recommendation, consider if planning enforcement team is suitably resourced. Okay, Wendy, Sarah.
Yeah, so if we can go to the vote, all those people in favour of the proposal, raise their hands accordingly.
Chair, there are 10 hands up, plus, are you voting for, Chair?
Yeah.
Yep, so 11 votes for.
And those against? 1. No.
1 abstention, I think.
1 abstention.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Thank you. So that motion is carried. That brings this meeting to an end, and I would like to thank anyone, including members of the public watching online, for taking part. However, I can just remind those present that the supporting officer will confirm when the meeting is no longer being recorded or going live, and until then, your comments will be live to the public. Thank you.